That's not good. I would ask, keep all the aldermen unmuted. I screwed up. I'm sorry. But so anyway, I'm going to call the Public Safety Committee to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Muhammad.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Present. Quorum being present, we need to do the approval of the minutes from the October 14th meeting. Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve the minutes from Wednesday, October 14th, 2020.
Second.
We have Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? And I saw Tamika Hubbard is present now, so can add her in there.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman
Aye.
Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Thank you. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Hi. We're going to start the meeting today with Board Bill 141. I do want to make a statement about this board bill. That I got a call well after the fact from Alderwoman Megan Green saying that this should have public testimony. She knows the rules, and to have people email me way after the fact when the rules are plain that we cannot hear public testimony without the proper timeline. This has been in the works for 2 weeks. So if anybody questions why there's no public testimony on this, we were not notified by anyone within or before the 24-hour period. The other bill does have public testimony, or the workhouse, and that was because Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard and others certainly emailed within what is the timeline. I did offer to let Alderwoman Megan Green speak on this if she wants to. I don't know that I even see her in the people are online. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go through it. I'd like to explain why there can't be public testimony. And if we were to take it now, it would be highly illegal. And I would encourage Alderwoman Green to read the rules and certainly give me plenty of notice. And then this could have happened. I'm not going to delay this bill. We are going to vote on this. We delayed it last week because of other meetings. We're going to have an up or down vote on the committee unless the committee members choose to do otherwise. Alderman Coder, please present your bill. And
Thank you, Chairman Vaccaro. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate the committee's time today. Board Bill 141 is pretty simple, and I think despite some of our colleagues' conspiracy theories to the contrary, all we're doing here is codifying what's been the arrangement between the Park Service, the National Park Service, the rangers on the Arch grounds at Gateway Arch National Park, and the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that, in the last 6 months or so, we've seen an uptick in incidents, and including, some violent crime downtown and around the Arch grounds. Through that discussion, we've been asking, how do we get more resources? What can we do to better police, parts of downtown? And someone brought up, well, what are the park rangers doing, the National Park Service? And I think it sort of became apparent that while they've always been around and will assist and help if called upon, there's no formal agreement allowing them to sort of police the perimeter of the arch grounds. I mean, for example, Lenore K. Sullivan is technically a city street, not federal land. So, the Park Service, the park rangers can't technically go without city permission onto Lenore K. Sullivan. So we would like their assistance. There's not that many of them, but to the extent they're on duty and on their bikes or in their cars or in their ATVs, we'd like them to assist with policing the perimeter of the arch grounds. And that's what this seeks to do. I mean, it's limited in scope. I mean, it references basically the city property around the Gateway Arch National Park. You're not going to see federal park rangers, patrolling elsewhere in the city. This is simply to codify the existing relationship between the police department and the National Park Service, the Department of the Interior officers. I would defer to Judge Edwards if he has anything further to add on this bill. I know he's been working on this with Mr. Wood, the head of the Gateway Arch National Park and the Department of the Interior. Judge Edwards, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Alderman Coder, Mr. Chairman, members of the Public Safety Committee. Thank you very much. Board Bill 141 is very, very simple, non-controversial. For about 57 years, the St. Louis Police Department and the park rangers have cooperated with respect to trying to stem crime on the arch grounds as well as the old courthouse. What we're doing is simply codifying, putting in writing what we have been doing for the last 57 years or so. And so what it allows a park ranger to detain an individual should a park ranger observe a crime in progress, whether it's in Keener Plaza or whether it's on Lenora K. Sullivan Drive. What it does not allow park rangers to do is to arrest individuals. It's a mutual aid agreement. It does not allow those park rangers to arrest. It allows them to detain for police officers. It allows any citizen to detain for a police officer. So what this simply does is it makes an oral agreement, an oral mutual aid agreement that we have, and we just simply put it in writing. It does not add any police officers. In fact, I don't even expect that we will see a lot of park rangers. They only are authorized to have 28 park rangers in the city of St. Louis. Currently, they have 17 that are employed due to inability to hire, transfers, and other problems that the National Park Ranger Service has right now. They only have 17 employed. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 2 rangers on the arch grounds and 2 inside of the old courthouse. I don't expect that they're going to be out much or they will be seen any more than they're seen right now. What I do want them to do is if they see if they see a crime afoot and they can safely get involved on Broadway at Keener Plaza, I do expect for them to go over. Now that may or may not happen, but I do want to give them the authority to be able to do that. That's the context in which we are asking to sign this agreement.
Chairman Vaccaro, that's, I think, really all we have. We're happy to answer any questions.
I'm sorry, Alderwoman Howard was texting me. She's still trying to come on, but I'm going to go down the list. Vice Chairman Jeffrey Boyd, any questions on this?
No questions.
Alderwoman Howard, any questions on this? And I'm sorry, you know what, you may want to wait. I'll come back to you.
I will refrain since I'm kind of late
Right.
joining this due to
Well,
complications.
and I had the same issues trying to get on.
Okay.
Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to offer a comment about how important it is to support our efforts to reduce crime downtown and to definitely do whatever we need to do to gather additional resources to address the problems that we are having downtown and on our riverfront. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderwoman.
Alderman John Muhammad. Any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman. This seems like a pretty standard bill to me. It has my full support.
Thank you. Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
No questions.
Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard.
No questions. Thank you.
And I have none. I will see is, yeah, I don't see her there. So I'm going to move on with this. Again, I did get emails well after the time limit. There is a time frame that you should send well before the 24 hours, and we could have considered it. But at this point, I will take a motion to pass this board bill out if the committee so chooses to do so. So I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Muhammad,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Aye. So we've passed out, well, we passed to the full board committee. Board Bill 141 has been passed out with a due pass recommendation to the full board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on. The next part of this is going to be an open discussion with public testimony. So I think we're going to start with the Budget Director, Paul Payne. And I hope Paul Payne and Commissioner Glass are on here somewhere. So Paul, are you here somewhere? I don't know if I see him, but he should be here. And what about Commissioner Glass? Are you here? Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead, since they're not here yet, we'll go ahead and start the public discussion, and I would hope the clerk or somebody finds these guys and lets them know that they agreed to be on a meeting with us at 9 o'clock this morning. And it's disappointing they're not here. Madam Clerk, can you, I got in front of me, go ahead and go down the list. Let's go ahead and do public testimony unless they choose to want to wait a few minutes until we find where everybody went. If you can go down the list, there's a couple people. Start with number 1 from Arch City Defenders.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
According to the agenda, there's a reading of the rules for public comment under item 2A.
Okay.
I think it's important for people to actually know the rules.
Okay, I agree with that. Mr. Clerk, you're here somewhere. Can you please read the item number 2?
I'm not sure if Mr. Clerk is on, but I'll go ahead and read.
Okay, if you could do it for us, that would be fine.
Rule 27, Public Hearing Procedures. The first 2 paragraphs will be read aloud. After the presentation of a bill at any public hearing, the proponents and opponents shall be heard alternately. All persons who wish to testify at a public hearing shall sign a list, which shall be made available by the chairman of the committee at least 1/2 hour before the announced time of the hearing. The initial presentation of any witness shall be no longer than 5 minutes, except with the permission of the committee chairman. But any witness may respond to questions by members of the committee for an additional period of time to be determined by the committee chairman. And any witness may submit written testimony to the committee at any time prior to the conclusion of the hearing of the bill.
Mr. Vice Chair, just an opinion, I'm looking for an opinion. Do you think we should go ahead and, I don't know I would assume they want to speak to us as the Board of Aldermen. I don't think any of the comments were going to go to Commissioner Glass or Paul Payne. I'm not happy they're not on, but hopefully somebody's getting them together because we want to know the answers. Do you feel it's appropriate to just go ahead and start? We only have 8 people signed up, 2 from Arch City Defenders, 1 from Action St. Louis, 1 from the 15th Ward, John Chastnoff, but he doesn't write anything down because he doesn't live in the city. Another one from Arch City Defenders. And maybe 2 more that may, or I guess they live in the city. It just doesn't show.
I think it's appropriate if that's the wish of the chair. I don't think anything's wrong with it.
Okay.
I think it would have been more effective if we could have had presentations by Commissioner Glass and the Budget Director, Paul Payne. But in order to not waste people's time, I'm certainly, open to hear public comment.
Okay, let's do that. We're going to hear public comment, and I'll also let the public stay on in case they want to add to their comment after somebody rallies these guys. So, Madam Clerk, are you there? You want to go ahead and start with number 1 on the public speakers from Arch City Defenders? We'll just go down the list. I assume they're all on just speakers. I don't think they're pro or con.
Inez Bordeaux.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Inez Bordeaux. I am the manager of community collaborations at Arch City Defenders. We joined this call because we wanted to have an opportunity to rebut some of the things that Dale Glass has said and that we suspect Paul Payne would say. But if they are not here, it's difficult to do that. So I think the people who are supporting the Close the Workhouse campaign and people from Arch City Defenders and Action St. Louis, we would be willing to wait until after Dale Glass and or Paul Payne shows up for this meeting that they agreed to be at.
Okay. Well, let me go this way. Out of the 8 speakers, is there anyone that doesn't want to wait? If you signed up. Does any one of the 8 feel like they want to speak now, or you want to just hold on while we find these guys? Apparently nobody wants to speak. Why don't any other aldermen that are on this Zoom, do you want to chime in with anything right now while we're waiting?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Lisa contacted Paul Payne and he never got an invitation. If STL TV can send him an invitation, please.
Because what's funny is he accepted. He may not have gotten that invitation, but I do know he accepted the time and said it. So that he should be on here shortly. And any of the alder people that are on here, we're going to start with committee members, and then any other alder person on here that cares to speak on this, please just either jump in or send me a text or raise your hand or something. Oh, here we go. Here's Paul. Paul, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning. I need you to go through, last meeting, Dale Glass had said there basically is not a whole lot, if any, savings. He said that we would have to send some of the detainees to a place about 3 hours out and other ones it's about an hour and a half away at a cost of $65 a person, plus the transportation costs of getting them back and forth. And so what we're looking for, and I think you had sent something, and if you want to share the screen, you can, that would be nice. If you can go through your report on what, if any, savings there would be if we were to close the workhouse.
Okay, yeah, back at the end of September, I did submit that memo to the Board of E&A looking at what the implications would be from a fiscal standpoint. Let me see if I could bring that up.
Yeah, if you could share the screen, it would be nice.
I have to make sure I've got it ready here. Okay, little technical difficulties.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
There we go. Thank you.
All right, here's the memo, basically going back to September 30th. And there were 3 scenarios we're looking at. What we could expect, should there be a closure in the current fiscal year at the end of the calendar year, and then what the impact would be going forward to FY22 and beyond. So if you were looking at basically the approach I took was to compare where we were currently under current operations is to establish a base of the expenditures. And right now, this was as of the end of I believe it was the 7th payroll, perhaps. Corrections was underspending its budget by a total of about $3 million. Most of that is due to vacant staff positions at the Justice Center, with the rest being some of the contractual services. Contractual services, the big ones are meals and medical, and that was because the population's been trending under. So that's where we were. So that's just our base scenario, current operations based on current population. So question becomes, all right, you close MSI at the end of the calendar year, what would that impact have on your projections for the current fiscal year? Well, in that scenario, what it would be basically is you've got a staff of MSI that primarily you're moving over to CJC. And given that you're not assuming any layoffs or anything such as that, and that represents about 75% of your costs, you are still paying most of those costs that would go over to CJC. In addition, BPS has estimated there would be some ongoing costs related to maintenance of the MSI facility. Now, they submitted to me a couple of scenarios, one where it's sort of operating in a shutdown mode, but the other one would be mothballing. I took the lower of the two, and in that contractual services assumption, we also assumed that they would need at least one individual that would maintain the plant, the physical plant, and so that would mean not only the grounds but also making sure pipes don't burst and things like that. And so that is in those projections. So comparing that to the 3 million below budget, it ended up being about 2.7. Why is that? Primarily, it's because you've got all those individuals who, the bulk of the cost being individuals who move over to the CJC. But then you've also got, and I forgot to mention, a study that they would do of the MSI facility. And that's one time. That would be a couple $100,000. And so that would be a little bit higher than what we'd be spending today. And then the third scenario is what happens in FY22 and beyond. And you can see from the numbers down below, and I've got detailed sheets attached to this as well. Basically, because of the scenario where they had, we're bringing a population into CJC, but we also need outstate housing and such. I've got a scenario where it's about $1.5 million below current budget, but that's still about $1.5 million higher than what they're spending today. Now, again, in reality, could I beat them down further? I probably could. I would expect overtime to go down, although we are still doing 3% pay raises, and we've got some health insurance costs that we offset this year. But the scenario, when you talk about could we save $6 or $7 million, I don't see that in these numbers, primarily because it's mostly personnel. I mean, unless you see a significant reduction in personnel costs, you're not going to see those costs materialize, those savings materialize anytime soon. Now, the other question I did want to, and then we did want to address is the capacity issues. I noticed in their discussion with moving over to Justice Center, they had a number of scenarios such that they believe that they would not be able to achieve the full services of a correctional facility that they would anticipate. That's usually required when they are retaining someone, simply because of the capacity. I think they even mentioned they had the possibility of keeping people on the floor and such. So I mean, that's going to be a long-term issue that's going to have to be addressed. For the scenario I had, regardless of whether or not it's used, this would anticipate at least keeping open the possibility of having individuals held out state. And for this scenario, they had identified 2 counties as a potential, and I think it was 60 beds total. I threw in 50 beds utilization at the average cost of $50 a day. And so that is in there on a contractual service level. And again, I did discuss a little bit more about the long-term issues regarding capacity, and I included some graphics here. I guess the question that is raised here is whether or not we are going to be able, what happens if there's an increase in inmate population, and what would the city do in that instance? I think that's still a question that's going to have to be answered, just based on historical patterns. I can remember, I've been here long enough to remember when we had inmates scattered throughout the state in various counties, and I don't think it is a situation where you want to return to that. But I do know from a budget standpoint that you're going to need to be prepared for that should that occur. So you want to make sure that you budget accordingly. And then I did put that note about the feds in there in terms of what the feds are doing for us. Again, and this has been a long running discussion, particularly about the state, because the feds basically, they come in and they help us, they help the city with apprehension and prosecution, and they do pay pretty close to what it costs on a daily basis to hold a detainee. Whereas the state of Missouri, they've been paying us that $22 a day forever, basically. I mean, if you go back to the, I think it was maybe 2000 or something like, it's been 20 years. It's been hovering around that level, and which is only a fraction of what the cost is. So, regardless of each year, we try to lobby additional funds for that that increase, but it doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And so, I would, of the 2 roles, I've always, and this has been a long-running argument about the state of Missouri's reimbursement rate to the counties in the state and being insufficient. And that was about it. I mean, I do have the detailed spreadsheets that came with this as well. But that was the basically the layout. Again, in the short term, I would not expect to see anything of a significant savings from that closure. Again, going into FY22, as with any department, we'd run them through the ringer to make sure they've justified positions and such. One of the things they said is that they needed additional positions due to separation issues. And we'd make them put their TO together and run them through postings and all that kind of stuff, review that pretty closely. But the question in terms of long-term savings really depends on the capacity issues and how that's addressed and where we go from here. And so that was basically the gist of what I put together.
Paul, I think go ahead and take that off then. And I'm going to open this up to committee members to start. Vice Chairman Boyd, do you have questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman Howard, questions for Paul Payne?
I have no questions. I read the report. Thank you.
Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard, any questions for Paul Payne?
No questions. I would just like to thank him for detailing this out for us. We definitely want the facts in front of us to see exactly what we are doing. So I'm just grateful for that. So no other questions or comments. Thank you.
Alderman John Muhammad. And I believe he had to step away for a few minutes. Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
No questions. It just, to me, I just have a comment. It's just showing that this isn't an easy fix, and it's going to be a long process because we're talking about changing something from years and a building and staff to be redirected. So I think it's going to cost us a lot of money, and we have to take that in consideration during this pandemic. Thank you.
Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard.
Thank you. Thank you, Budget Director Paul Payne. I'm still listening and gathering from what you said, so I don't have any questions right now. I'm going to wait to hear some more of the comments, and then I might be able to follow up.
Sure.
Paul, I have a quick question. I'm not that good of a numbers guy, and I get confused in the numbers. In your opinion, I know people are throwing out this 8 million, 6 million. And it seems like to me like there isn't really any savings, but I guess, is there any savings? I mean, the simple answer, and what kind of real number? If you were to just guess, I saw what you said, and it could be anywhere from a loss to a moderate gain, but.
Well, here's the question. I mean, again, based on just this initial approach, I didn't see any significant savings. Now, again, when the budget, and you know this as being on Ways and Means, but when we go through the budget process, obviously any department that submits and said, okay, we need these positions, we'll put them through the ringer as we normally do. And can we extract some more funds out of this? We would do what we do in the budget division. But realistically, is there a big pot here? Do I see that? No, I actually don't. But at least right now with the payroll we have, but I do think, and again, maybe this tails off of what Alderwoman Boyd mentioned when you're talking about longer term, because you're making a longer term decision. You really want to look at the trend and make sure you're positioned to where you can address anything over the longer term. It gets, you really want to make sure that you have the capacity issue resolved to some extent where everyone feels comfortable that the city has sufficient capacity to go forward. Otherwise, you would be incurring costs that would offset anything that you might achieve through the reduction in your operations. So that really that's sort of the crux of the issue in terms of the city going forward. And that, again, is a long-term review that needs to be done.
Okay, thanks, Paul. What I'm going to do, Alderman Dan Gunther, since you're the sponsor of the original bill, do you have questions for Paul Payne or Dale Glass? They're both on the line with us. You'd have to unmute yourself.
Yep. Thanks, Chairman. I guess you know, we've looked through what Paul kind of put out there as his analysis of it, and I believe some of the other guest speakers that we have will be bringing it up as well. But I guess kind of one of my questions, starting off, is that, you know, your report says that you know, we're saving about $3 million right now, but the majority of that is from a lack of staff, understaffing at CJC. So then if we're moving our employees from the workhouse to CJC, it seems like that reduction in personnel and having those positions filled with existing people, it seems like there's going to be a lot more personnel saving there. So I guess my question, Paul, is, in your numbers, are you assuming that CJC is fully staffed, they're full staffing levels, and then adding the workhouse, the MSI on top of that? Or are you looking at the current employment level of CJC and the current costs, and then adding those? And I don't see how we're not saving money by filling the empty positions with existing positions from the workhouse. So
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, that's a good question. And I asked the same thing. And basically, those projections are based on current actual expenditures, not budget expenditures, but current actual expenditures with the current salaries. Now, where you're going to see a reduction, you should see a reduction in CJC, is in overtime, because they are overspending overtime because they are understaffed, and so you are generating overtime. Not reflected in these numbers, however, would be the 3% pay increases, which are yet to be distributed throughout the fiscal year, and then next year, I don't know if you recall, when we balanced this year's budget, we offset a lot of health insurance costs. So there's several $100,000 worth of that kind of stuff that's going to be in that bottom line. So yeah, from a personnel standpoint, you should see a reduction in overtime, because you've got now where you have vacant positions. Currently, if you move people over, you no longer have vacant positions. So theoretically, you shouldn't have that much overtime. In the overtime department, they were budgeted $500,000. They're currently spending about $1.5 million. So I would expect, again, when you put them to the ring, okay, if you're going to have all these filled positions, you don't need that much overtime, so you can knock that down. And whether it's $1 million or so.
Well, $1.5 million.
Well, that would be zero. And again, this is a 24-hour institution. You just don't have that. But the 3% pay raises in the health insurance is going to several $100,000 of that. The pay raise itself is worth somewhere in the $600,000 or $700,000 range, plus the health insurance is several $100,000 more. That kind of thing is going to erode any savings you get on the overtime. Again,
but it's take
a lot of refinement before you get to the actual budget of FY22.
But our existing health insurance and 3% raises are already factored in for fully staffed of CJC and MSI.
Actually,
so
not because if remember, I don't know if you follow the budget, but what we advised at the time is that they would have to eat those expenditures and make it work within their budget. Now, if you project forward on that, which we're using payroll as of the 7th pay period, anyone who has not yet received that 3%, that would not be in that payroll projection. So, and now again, you could have attrition that could reduce that a little bit further, but you're not going to see, but you will be seeing that base go up by the end of the fiscal year, the current fiscal year, which you're going to have to plan for next fiscal year.
Okay, but that's something that you do with every department every year.
Yes, that's correct.
So, okay, so that's just basically my question. And again, I need to lay out your charts and grab a calculator. Obviously, I'm not the mathematician that you are, but it really just seems that looking at it, the very first paragraph of your report, says we're $3 million under budget.
Right.
2.5 million of that is from understaffing at CJC.
Right.
So it just, to me, it looks like you're taking a fully staffed CJC and adding MSI employees. And that's why you're saying there's no savings yet.
Yeah, I see where you're going. The question was that, am I comparing it to, you were saying, am I comparing it to budget or am I comparing it to projections? I'm comparing it to this year's projections because the question was, what would the impact be over the closure based on the current operations? Well, the current operations are tracking under budget. So you're not going to use budget for the comparison. You're going to use whatever the current operations projections would be for the comparison, right? Which is less. So regardless of the status of MSI, if we're budgeting for next year, and I'm looking at the projections based on today, it would be lower, just on a current status, right? And so the question then would be, what would be the difference with the closure scenario compared to that other scenario? And that's the difference. If that makes sense.
Okay, well, that was my main question from reading the report right now. But Mr. Chairman, I thank you for allowing me to ask the first question. I would be happy to let the speakers go ahead and say what they ask the question they need.
I'm going to go down the list of all the people that are on here because they can ask direct questions to either one, and then we'll listen to what the speakers have to say. And I noticed that Alderwoman Christina Gracias, you're on here. Do you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions right now, but if possible, I might after the speakers have time.
Okay, and who else? The Alderwoman Heather Navarro, I saw you on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, am I missing any of the Alder people? I'm trying to look down this list. I don't see anyone else. Madam Clerk, can you start then going down the list of speakers? We'll start with the young lady from Arch City Defenders that started.
Inez Bordeaux.
Yes, if we could start with her, that would be wonderful, and we'll work our way down the list. So Inez, if you can just unmute yourself, and we're here to listen now.
Hi, thank you, Alderman Vaccaro. I am going to cede my time to one of my colleagues, Noel.
Okay, so Noel, you're next on the list anyway. So,
I can myself, but I can't start my video.
I'm sorry, what's that?
There we go.
We can hear you.
Great. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be back at the Board of Aldermen. My name's Noel Pfeffer. I'm a lawyer at Arch City Defenders, and I'm here to testify on the budget. And it's great to see some familiar faces as well. Alderman Vaccaro and Boyd, Alderwoman Hubbard and Howard. It's great to see you all. So I was thrilled back in July to see the Board of Aldermen unanimously pass Ordinance 71217, committing to closing the workhouse by the end of the year. And I've been frankly disappointed by some backtracking. Obviously, it is an administratively complicated process, but actually it's really not, as Commissioner Glass pointed out. It's really driving the buses back to the workhouse. But what is a little bit more tricky is understanding the fiscal consequences on our budget. And that's really what I want to dive into, because I read Budget Director Payne's memo carefully, and with all due respect, I think it has a number of conservative assumptions, which are designed to inflate the Department of Corrections' future budget. Because after all, if we give them a large budget, what's the worst that happens? The money reverts back to reserves in the capital fund. And Budget Director Payne claimed that there's no way to get $6 to $7 million out of this. And I actually think it's a pretty straightforward path to seeing how closing a building leads to saving $6 to $7 million, especially because Budget Director Payne assumes that it's going to take more staff to staff the CJC than we currently use to run the MSI and CJC combined. He provides for 356 staff, whereas we currently run it, according to his own memo, with 328. So I'm going to get into some kind of technical detail about where we get this $7 million in savings. But before we get there, I want to also explain why we're not talking about the $16 million in savings. And that's because even though historically the workhouse has been budgeted at $16 million, in the previous budget cycle, that budget was cut down to $8 million. And those savings were used to plug budget holes. And I want to be clear that as we move into FY22 and we move forward, we need to be essentially saying that that $8 million is part of the conversation as well and part of those savings. We've just already used them. But in any case, talking now about the workhouse's $8 million budget and the budget director's assumptions, there's three big assumptions that I want to dig into that collectively add up to $5.5 million. And that $5.5 million compared, in addition to the $1.5 million in savings that the budget director already projects, is going to get us to the $7 million in total savings. So the first assumption that I want to dig into is the line that he adds in, adding 40 staff positions, taking the CJC staff from 316 to 356, and all of which is above, by the way, its historical staff numbers of 300. And that adds $1.3 million to the budget. And on the contrary, we believe that the CJC's budget should be frozen because the fact of the matter is that it's already overstaffed. We are currently running the CJC with 237 staff. According to the Department of Justice, the average inmate to correctional officer ratio is 4:1. If we ran the CJC at that ratio with its 860 bed capacity, that would be 215 correctional officers. Instead, we currently run it at 316 is what it was funded for in FY21, and Budget Director Payne is proposing taking that to 356. That would make it one of the most overstaffed jails in America with a inmate to correctional officer ratio of 2.4. And the fact of the matter is we should be freezing the CJC's budget until we conduct a full staffing analysis. That's what the National Institute of Corrections recommends. And we've yet to see such a staffing analysis. And there's certainly no grounds to add 40 staff on top of that, especially when, again, we currently run both the workhouse and the CJC with less staff. So that's $1.3 million. The next big assumption that I want to dig into is exactly what Alderman Gunther was talking about. And it translates into $3.3 million in Budget Director Payne's budget. And that's because, exactly as Alderman Gunther points out, he adds the workhouse's current personnel budget of $5.7 million. He adds that directly to the current projected expenditures. But as Paul Payne conceded himself, that doesn't account for the fact that when you're fully staffing CJC, you're going to be getting rid of I actually wasn't clear on this, Budget Director Payne. Is that 1.5 million that we're currently tracking overtime, or 1.5 million by the end of the year? Either way, you're going to be saving well over $1 million that isn't reflected in the current budget. But it actually goes further. It also doesn't account for the fact that attrition will reduce those personnel costs that are transferred over. And it doesn't account for the fact that we can transfer folks out of MSI and to other of the city's hundreds of vacant positions, whether in the streets department, forestry, building division, all jobs which require relatively little training and which correctional officers would be qualified to do, especially because, frankly, the Department of Corrections is currently hemorrhaging employees. In FY20, they had 464 occupied positions. At the beginning of FY21, they had 375 occupied positions. And now, according to Budget Director Payne's memo, they have 328. So all in all, they're already losing these positions because evidently some people don't want to be correctional officers. And it appears that it wouldn't be it's perfectly feasible to transfer folks to other departments and provide them with the same benefits package, salary. And that provides for massive savings as well. And so that's the 3.3 million that, again, you get those savings if you just freeze the CJC budget at its current level until we conduct a staffing analysis. And then the last piece, because we've got 1.3 million, 3.3 million, that's 4.6. There's another 0.9 million that's going to take us to 5.5, and then that full 7 million with the 1.5 million in savings. The 0.9 million is the transfers to Miller County and St. Francis County. And I want to be very clear that the Close the Workhouse Coalition does not support transferring folks outstate. That's, as was discussed in this committee previously, imposes a massive hardship on those families, not to mention that St. Francis County Jail is horrific conditions and has in fact lost their contract with the feds over it. But in any case, what we really need to be talking about is how we expand capacity at CJC and avoid overcrowding. And even further, how we reduce that average length of stay. Because currently the average length of stay for pretrial detainees is 331 days. That's nearly a year. These are individuals who have not been convicted, individuals who actually nationally, the rate of pretrial detainees who are later, their charges are dropped or found innocent is close to 50%. And these are individuals whose lives are put on hold, who lose their jobs, who lose contact with their children, lives that are destroyed. And we don't want to send them to Miller or St. Francis County, and we should not provide a budget line item to do so. We need to send these people home. And if we don't fund that, we put pressure on the judicial system to continue doing what they've already begun to do with the Pretrial Services Office and other efforts to increase the rate that individuals are released on their own recognition without bail. There are still, however, currently hundreds of people who have been at MSI and CJC for almost a year. Again, that's the average. There's some who have been there even longer. And including a line item in the budget to send them to Miller and St. Francis County is not part of the, frankly, abolitionist vision that the Close the Workhouse campaign is founded on. And so when you put those all together, and then we can get even more nitpicky and talk about the Board of Public Service issuing a $200,000 contract, when of course the truth is that that should be a public process to re-envision what the workhouse does. But that's how you get to those $7 million in savings, which is obvious as soon as you stop making assumptions that would have CJC be the most staffed jail in the country. And so,
if I can get you to wrap it up, you used your time and the person before you and probably the person after you. I kind of let you go for a while here. But.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, Alderman. I'll conclude with some concrete recommendations for the committee should you be interested in fulfilling your commitment to close the workhouse by the end of the year, as was unanimously passed in Ordinance 71217. I would recommend, first of all, the budget director just told you that there's $3 million surplus dollars in the Department of Corrections right now. Pass a supplemental appropriation directing that money, as you provided for in Ordinance 71217, to the Division of Supportive Reentry and the Re-envisioning Public Safety Fund. Also, ask for a staffing analysis and inquire as to why the Department of Corrections is hemorrhaging employees. Freeze the Department of Corrections budget. And finally, and this is a small point, but invite Rick Bradley to testify on the staffing on the capacity of rated beds at CJC, because that institution was built in 2002 for $80 million to hold 860 people. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go down the list. Paul, if you can kind of make your notes, I'm going to reserve your comments toward the end if I could. So it looks like Jay Shepard, maybe. Action St. Louis, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
Okay, did you want to comment or was yours pretty much covered?
Well, I wanted to cede my time to Newell if he had any last points to make.
Well, believe me, he did yours, his, and the person. I kind of let him go because he felt like he was speaking for the group. So we'll move on then. Is it Emilia?
Hi, yeah, Amelia.
Amelia, I'm sorry, I'm not that good with names. Amelia,
That's okay.
do you have something you want to say, or have you been covered already?
Yeah, so my name is Amelia. I'm a resident of the 15th Ward. And as you pointed out, Nawel gave a really good presentation on some of the numbers and statistics and all the amazing facts. And I wanted to speak as just a everyday resident who, doesn't have the sort of understanding of all of these complex facts about just the feelings that I had coming out of the meeting, the last public safety meeting, which I watched in its entirety. So I wanted to share some of the feelings that I think I and many other residents of the city feel watching all of this unfold. And so the first feeling I had was outrage by what felt like a very transparent and biased assessment by the commissioner last time that clearly was not in good faith to actually do what the Board of Aldermen said it was going to do, which is to close the workhouse. And he didn't even propose any facts that would lead to the closure of the workhouse. All he did was talk about, well, we can't do it because of this would be hard, this would cost us more money. And so it felt like a very transparent, bad faith process that clearly was not in the interest of actually doing what the Board of Aldermen said it was going to do. I also felt a sense of deja vu to what's going on at the state level right now with Amendment 3, where we had our elected officials listen to the will of the people, which in this city issue was that we wanted to close the workhouse. On the state level was we wanted clean Missouri, and then our elected officials came back to us and said, oh, well, you didn't actually know what you were talking about. We know better than you, and we're going to do what we think is best and not actually listen to the will of the people. So in this case, seeing Amendment 3 on the ballot this year, and here seeing that the Board of Aldermen is clearly interested in overturning the will of the people, overturning what they said they would do, which was to close the workhouse. I also felt my intelligence insulted, quite frankly, by the commissioner's report, because he went to great lengths to tell us what a great prison this is with so many amazing programs that would be difficult to recreate at the CJC. And so I guess we're just supposed to disregard the stories and testimonies of the hundreds of inmates and loved ones who have told us about the torturous conditions of this jail. And so pretending that it is some sort of utopia of a prison felt very insulting to listen to, because we have heard stories and stories of the mold, the bugs, the cockroaches, the rodents, the lack of air conditioning, just the absolute hellish conditions of this jail. And so I quite frankly didn't really believe the commissioner when he was telling us, oh, well, this is such a great prison because we have all these programs. I was also frustrated by the lack of imagination to bring these programs to the CJC. And lastly, I felt hopeless because all of our elected officials and the commissioner just seemed to accept it as a foregone conclusion that incarceration rates will rise, when actually we've been seeing the opposite due to the community organizing, due to the community investment of things like Close the Workhouse. And it seems like they can't imagine a better world where we actually invest in the communities to stop the problems, to stop the violence at its roots, and instead are just focused on the fact that, oh, well, we'll just have to keep locking up people. And so we need to be ready for our capacity to be overrun and things like that. Despite the fact that rates are declining, despite the fact that we are doing the work to make sure that people don't need to be incarcerated. And so I don't know how many times we have to scream that more prisons and more cops are not the solution to anything. We've seen that over decades, that they're not actually helping anything. And so as an everyday resident, everyday citizen who just cares about this issue, I have been incredibly frustrated to watch this process unfold and to watch our elected officials just disregard the will of the city, which is to close the workhouse. And as Nawel pointed out, there's all the money and all the things to do it. So yeah, I just hope that you will listen to what you did several months ago and make sure that the workhouse is closed on December 31st, because it seems there is more than enough capacity to do so. So thank you very much for letting me speak today.
Thank you. Next speaker is John Chastnoff, if you're still with us. John, you got your 5 minutes. John Chastnoff, are you there?
Oh, there, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You got your 5 minutes.
Okay, I can start I'm sorry, I've just got instructions. I can start my video. Okay. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I will try to be brief. I know that it's hard for my mind to grasp all the numbers that have been, put out before us this morning and to evaluate the different points of view. So the first thing I'd like to do is suggest to the alders who are on the Public Safety Committee that you replay this hearing, listen again to both presentations and try to absorb the numbers. From my point of view, I share Alderman Gunther's skepticism about using the understaffing at CJC to make an argument that somehow there will be additional expenses, involved in transferring personnel over to CJC. It seems to me like you're transferring an expense from CJC and counting it against the MSI program. That didn't make sense to me. Also, I think that this question of the true capacity of the CJC is an important one to look into more. I know it was built for a higher capacity than we're being told that it can handle now. And I also have some questions about projections into the future about future capacity. I think Amelia made a very good point that that times have changed. Our approach to incarceration has changed, and looking at historical numbers may not be relevant looking towards the future. One of the facts that Mr. Pfeffer mentioned was that the length of stay is still very long in our city jails. That has been coming down, and we need to work harder to make sure that that continues to come down. We need to work to make sure that more people are granted release on their own recognizance without bail. And so I think that there is a lot of capacity savings to be gained if we keep working at a new vision of public safety. And that's really the main point that I'd like to just kind of remind the committee members about. The Close the Workhouse campaign is part of a larger vision of re-envisioning public safety, looking at these questions differently. Our conclusions are that the arrest and incarcerate model has failed us. And it seems to me a lot of the assumptions that the budget director and the commissioner are making are based on that failed model. We need to continue to work to reimagine what we do to keep our public safe. And that doesn't involve locking people up nearly to the extent that we've done in the past. And so with that, I'll conclude and just recommend to the board members that the vision that everyone unanimously bought into in the spring still holds. The numbers seem to me to indicate that we still can close the workhouse responsibly. And I would hope that you all would continue on that path to close it by the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Madison, you're with Arch City Defenders. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Madison Orozco. And thank you so much for letting us have this public comment. And I appreciate what everyone has said before. I want to touch a little bit more about capacity, the capacity of CJC and capacity that's been referenced a lot in Commissioner Glass's reports and throughout these conversations. So just kind of want to add and clarify that in general, when we look at CJC capacity, the Glass's reports seem to really be playing down the capacity that was there, claiming that it should adjust its functional capacity of 782 down by roughly 70 beds to account for the need to keep certain populations separate. The reality is that CJC was built in 2002 for $80 million to house 860 detainees. And while the jail has been reorganized and rated beds have been removed, the claim that the only way to house this number, 749 detainees in CJC, would involve sleeping about 20 on the floor or potentially sending them somewhere else, really just kind of fails to explore the alternative, what it could look like to reorganize the jail according to its original blueprint and then re-adding those rated beds in. And then on the conversation again of capacity, something that comes up time and time again is this issue of federal detainees. people who we have who are being held solely on federal charges, not federal and state charge, or federal and the local charges, but just the federal charges. And we talk about that, you know, there's no, because we have this, because we have these people being detained in our jails, that really impacts the capacity that we have. And that apparently there's nowhere else for them to go. But if you look at the jail population data that's available, the jail in St. Charles actually has more than enough room for these detainees, and is a jail that hasn't even really been contacted about this process. So just to say, there are other options to the capacity issues that have been brought up, and also there's more to consider within the capacity issues that might not be as much of a capacity issue as what we've been told. And then just some kind of general questions that I feel like are left like a bit unanswered from the reports and presentations that we've had, and then around the federal detainees, are basically how many federal detainees are being held at CJC. This information about federal detainees had been on the city's website at one point, but the dashboard has recently been edited and no longer includes the number of detainees. And that's something that, you know, I think we should be able to know. If it's money that is going on, if it's people that are being held, it's something that we should be able to know. And we do appreciate that there are a lot of new statistics on that website now that are helpful, but also it seems really important to have this one number on there, especially since this is something that keeps coming up in question time and time again. And that level of transparency is really important so that we can be making informed decisions. So I really just kind of wanted to raise those points and continue to echo what everyone else has been saying, and just that we did have consensus. There was consensus in July when a unanimous vote happened and when the bill passed for the workhouse to close by the end of this year. And if it didn't seem like it was something that wasn't going to be possible then, we still need to be working towards that now. The will of the people is still there. The will of those who have voted you into office is still there. And we have laid out time and time again plans and ways to make this happen. So we are really, you know, excited that we are going to move forward with this together, and want to make sure that we continue with the vision that was agreed upon by 28 people in a room, and that vision continues, because that is just, you know, that 28 people voting for it is only, you know, a small percentage of showing like what the people in the city want. How many more people like are represented by those 28 people that want this jail to be closed, and that, you know, we're excited when you voted for this jail to be closed. And so we need to follow through on what we said we were going to do, or else how can we have confidence in our, you know, electoral systems and in our government if we say that something is going to happen and then decide that we don't want it to happen and try and put out a lot of information as to why it shouldn't, when that information isn't necessarily even based in a lot of fact. So thank you for my time. Appreciate everyone who's been speaking. We really look forward to seeing the workhouse closed by the end of this year.
Okay, thank you. Emily, are you still here and did you want to talk? Emily, are you still here? You want to talk? There you are. I can't hear you though. You can't hear you for some reason. I don't know. You show yourself as muted right now. There's no sound. Emily, there's no sound.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, yes, it is going through here. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I'm getting some reverb. I am a resident of the city. I'm in the 5th ward. I'm sorry.
Emily, we can hardly hear you. You're gonna have to speak up.
Okay. I am a resident of the city. I'm in the 8th ward. And I was very encouraged when the alders voted to close the workhouse. I think residents are clear that this facility is serving in many ways of our fellow neighbors and neighborhoods because of the what I believe is a full incarceration of the individuals based on mostly non-violent offenses.
Emily, you can speak a lot louder, dear. I can't hear you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I can't hear you.
I don't understand.
Just kind of talk as loud as you can.
Okay. So I would like to chime in to say that I think that I would thank the elders house because I believe that we are working to, as residents, we're working to improve our city and our difficulties with systems by which our neighborhoods become, and can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's just, but you're really weak and can hear about every other word. You just have to speak up.
Okay, what about this?
We can hear, I can hear you. It's just not well, but just speak as loud as you can and we can listen.
Okay. Well, I think I'm confident that the City Justice Center can be more readily used, especially given all of the capacities and the way that the pretrial services have been changed to provide better services so that individuals are not incarcerated without trial, without directions, that we can put forth efforts to I think that I also wonder, I think that residents really understand and are clear that greater incarceration does not lead from a number of things that just criminalizing is a better way to do so. Our community is striving and wanting to do this. I'm sorry, can you not hear?
Not very well, but I did get the gist of what you said. You feel we're not utilizing the Justice Center the way we should. Pretty much what everybody has said before you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So, I mean, I did get the gist of it, and that you're from the 8th Ward, I think you said.
That's right.
So, I think what we'll do, we're going to move on, unless you really feel like we didn't give you just time. It's just so hard to hear you. We're not getting the whole thing. So I think we'll move on. And the last speaker we're going to have is Toby. Doesn't really say what ward you're from, but Toby, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, am I pronouncing it right?
Toby Matava is my name. I live in the 7th Ward.
Okay, cool. Toby, you got your 5 minutes here.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank the committee for allowing me this time to speak right now. I really just want to echo everything that has been said before, especially the points that were raised by Noel. I do think that budget considerations need to be more carefully explored than they have been. When this report from Commissioner Glass first came out, I listened at the Public Safety Committee hearing and read through the report on my own, and I really have been very troubled at the biased approach that I see this report took. We all, as human beings, we all have our inherent biases and our opinions, but when asked to do a report for work where the product is going to affect the lives of so many people, it is really incumbent upon us to put our biases aside and try to adapt as neutral a lens as we can to that process. The issues and concerns that were raised by the previous speakers, to me, just support the fact that this was not an unbiased report from the get-go. The board, on July 20th, the board voted and enacted ordinances 71217. I was thrilled to hear that, just as many other people that are citizens in this great city are, and am very troubled and concerned by the backtracking that I saw taking place during the Public Service Committee hearing. I would actually ask, since Jay Shepard did ask to cede their time to give Noel a chance to further address some of the points of the budget that are so important, that be added and that be a consideration that's truly given here. I do think that the budget needs to be gone over more carefully, and all of the options in terms of numbers of staffing need to be addressed and explored, which this report did not do. And in addition, the issues that Madison raised about capacity at CJC and how it was initially designed to hold over 800 detainees, I think those kinds of issues also need to be addressed. I don't think any of this needs to be taken lightly. As a voter, I always expect the people that I vote into office to be good to their word. And a vote taken by the full Board of Aldermen to close the workhouse by the end of the year is something that I take very seriously. And I do expect my elected officials to stay strong and to take votes and then to support the votes that they've taken and not to backtrack, and to demand that people who are supposed to produce reports do that in an unbiased and comprehensive manner. Our approach to public safety and incarceration have been changing. We're in the midst of a lot of change, and some of those changes need to be incorporated and considered in any reports that are produced. That's all that I really need to say right now. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on. We've used all the time. The only time really left, if Noel wants, is it would have 1 minute and 30 seconds. If he would choose to use that 1 minute, he can, and then we're gonna move on.
Sure.
So Noel, that's the only time left that was not used, and I've been timing everything. It's actually, she went on 3 minutes, 32.41 seconds. So you'll have exactly 1.5 minutes if you want to use that time.
Great. I'd actually like, if Budget Director Payne is still on the call, to just ask a couple specific questions.
He's not going to answer questions except for to members of the Board of Aldermen. If you have something you want to state, I'm sure somebody will pick it up.
Okay. In that case, I guess I'll just extend the same exact argument I made about why the FY22 analysis is so conservative and finds only $1.5 million in savings when you can get up to $7 million by freezing CJC's budget, which again is already, we're only overstaffed, and it's overstaffed in terms of how many people are budgeted for, the number of funded positions, 316, but also it's only has 237 occupied positions. So it would be easy to freeze the budget at its current position. And there's plenty of room in there to transfer folks over from MSI, assuming that you can also transfer folks to other positions within the city, and also that the overtime goes down. And that was what my question was going to be about, trying to get some hard numbers there. But the same exact logic applies to FY21. And the budget director claims that if you close the workhouse, we'll only get $2.7 million in savings. But our analysis shows that it's closer to $3.8 million in savings. And again, I would just urge the Board of Aldermen to do a supplemental appropriation. take that money out of the Department of Corrections, fulfill the vision of Ordinance 71217, divest from the carceral state, and invest in re-envisioning public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. And you stayed right in time. Very good. Okay, I'm going to add a couple comments and then I'm going to move on. First off, I'm sorry that you feel that our city employees are very unskilled and you could take anybody and just put them into refuge or the street department or maintenance. So that kind of struck me as, gee, we have a very unskilled group of city employees, and boy, I don't even know why we're even, we can just see if maybe some people off the street might. Apparently we have all unskilled city employees that just anybody could fill, and take offense to that. The other reference to this board bill was not exactly to close, but to look into how to close, if we were to close, to get these numbers. And I can tell you from personal experience, and I asked the sponsor of this bill, Alderman Dan Gunther, to go even as a surprise visit. When I've talked to the residents inside there, which nobody seems to want to do, they are not in favor of this. They feel that leave us alone. The idea of let's just do this and it doesn't matter who we affect, as long as we win. I disagree with that philosophy. I'm not opposed to if it makes sense to close the workhouse, but to just say, well, it doesn't matter, and because Dale Glass, who should know what he's talking about, we're going to say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. We know more about the prison system than you'll ever know. And to Paul Payne, our budget director, who I often fight with, to say, gee, you know what? You don't know what numbers you're crunching. We crunched our own numbers. And I'm going to let Paul address all the questions that were out there, but I did get a little frustrated, especially at the point that we have a bunch of non-skilled city employees. And I certainly, speaking on behalf of all of our non-skilled city employees, why don't you come try and do any one of their jobs? They're very skilled, they're very hardworking, they're overworked, underpaid. Anyway, I'm going to move on. Paul, would you please try to respond to all these questions? And then we're going to go through the board, and also Commissioner Glass, you, and then we'll go through the board and we'll work our way through this.
Yeah, I'll jump in. A number of things that popped in my mind, but I do want to separate out, it seems to be two different issues. One about the public safety issue, corrections, the capacity of CJC and all that, which is separate, I believe, from the fiscal issue that we're talking about, because I don't pretend to be an expert when it comes to the public safety about what, who gets arrested and why and how long they're held and all that kind of stuff. What I'm more interested in, as I've always been, is mostly on the fiscal side in terms of what the fiscal impact would be. A couple of issues and a number, you hit on one, Mr. Chairman, in terms of personnel. Now the budget, the ordinance that was passed suggested, I mean, there would be no layoffs, and we're going to assume that these individuals continue working with the city. Now I have not seen any study that says they get to be where they would be located in any other city department, but a brief discussion I've had with the Department of Personnel is most of those individuals, and if you look at their classifications and their corrections, would be under CJC. In terms of the requested additional positions, that was in the 40 positions that were recited as minimum. That was in the plan that was submitted by corrections. So the costs associated with that would have to be, at least at this point, would be budgeted based on that recommendation in corrections' own study. Again, anytime we go through a budget that department asks for something like that, we will put them through the grinder on those kind of things, and we'll have positions identified and coverages and for each slot and all that kind of thing. But based on the way the ordinance was written, I'm basing this on basically the plan that has been submitted. Similarly, on the outstate housing, Sure, I've got it. I forget what it is. I don't have it in front of me, but the $1 million or whatever we are assuming for outstate housing. We could say, oh, well, we don't want to do outstate housing, and that's fine. That's a policy decision. But the question then becomes one of occupancy, I mean, and capacity. So if you decide to go in the fiscal year with a certain capacity, yeah, you could reduce your costs, but is that something that you want to do? On those kind of questions, I have to defer to the public safety department and say, okay, you know the lay of the land better than I would. What do you project in terms of what the capacity is going to be and what the census may be going forward? And so those are the kinds of decisions that have to be made, and those are policy calls. But in terms of putting the numbers on, I'm going to put on the numbers based on what those decisions are. I mean, and so, and that's how I see it. In terms of supplemental, unfortunately, this is not the only issue we're dealing with this year in terms of COVID and the budget. And so you may be underspending in somewhere, but if revenue is falling short somewhere else, we're gonna clamp down on everything to make sure that we stay within budget and stay within our projected revenues. And that's it. So this is not some just one off that can be separated from everything else. And so, yeah, the first quarter has been out, and I definitely do not want to be doing supplementals, particularly in this where we are in the current fiscal year. So that would be just some of the comments I have based on what I've heard.
So, and then, Madam Clerk, my apologies. There were 2 letters sent in. Can you read both of those into? Someone just sent me by chat, and I didn't purposely forget them, but there were 2 letters sent in. Can you read them into the record for us?
Yes, actually, I have a total of 3.
3. Okay, I was 2 were sent to me, but if you could read them into the record, that would be nice.
The first one is Dan U. Convert to the Public Safety Committee. Number 1, show faith in resolutions already passed. You already agreed to close the workhouse. Number 2, budget will be better if we close the workhouse. It will save money without hurting public safety. Number 3, stop filling Justice Center with Fed contract prisoners. This is a bad use of our budget and resources and will be used as an excuse to not close workhouse because we don't have room at Justice Center. This will never be an issue if we stop taking them. It also eliminates a significant liability should one of these contracted prisoners die and or sue over conditions. With current COVID conditions raging, this is a real possibility. Number 4, history of MSI shows it should be closed and the restructured raised so it can be inappropriately used in future. Condition of building, even the newer parts, will deteriorate, especially when mainly unoccupied. Number 5, to write the history of injustice associated with the building and demonstration to the people of the city that the city government will stand by its word. This facility must be closed, no deeds or buts. Doing any less is flipping the bird to the people of St. Louis, especially former inmates and activists who have pushed for this closure for years now. You must do the right thing and complete the commitment to closing the workhouse. Sincerely, Dan U. Convert. To the members of the Public Safety Committee. Hello, I am a resident of St. Louis. I unfortunately cannot make it to the Public Safety Committee tomorrow due to work obligations, but would like to voice my opinion on the topic of closing the workhouse by December 20th, 2020. I'm sorry, December 2020. This legislation was passed unanimously by our alders, and now is not the time to backtrack. We do not have to continue to incarcerate people in the name of public safety. Commissioner Glass' testimony suggests that the consistent decrease in the jail population could reverse due to increasing crime. We have seen through the pandemic that it is important to continue to reduce the jail population, and that is possible. Crime will not resolve itself if we do not free up money to address the root causes of problem. The Close the Workhouse campaign has always been about 2 goals: closing the workhouse facilities, reinvesting money into communities to prevent crime in the first place, We could continue to justify keeping the hellish jail open, or we can start investing money in things that actually prevent crime and allow for our communities to thrive. The people of St. Louis are already for a more creative solution to public safety that addresses the root causes of crime and invest in Black communities rather than continuing to invest in the failed arrest and incarcerated system. Thank you, Julia Cushing. To the Public Safety Committee members, hello, my name is Julia Singley. I reside on North Drive in St. Louis. If you ask the residents of St. Louis how to spend multi-million-dollar jails and workhouse budget to make their lives safer, they will give you dozens of ways to invest in their lives. Dozens, if not hundreds of ways to make their lives and their neighborhoods safer, happier, and healthier. The people of St. Louis know what they need, and it is not the workhouse or any jail. Black and brown, unhoused, poor, working class, queer, or trans residents of St. Louis deserve so much more than your continued white supremacist cages and handcuffs. You have severely traumatized, chronically injured, and disappeared people that you caged in the workhouse. There are blood on your hands and blood in the jail. You must account for that publicly, apologizing and investing in participatory budgeting process to give power to the people. The workhouse does not keep us safe. Investing in public housing, schools, job for all, healthcare for all, healing justice, and ending white supremacy does. There are enough vacant homes in our region for everyone to have a place to live. Yet you keep funneling millions of tax dollars into a system hell-bent on destruction of Black and brown families. Our region is experiencing unprecedented homicides, homelessness, domestic violence, murders of Black trans women, unemployment, you name it. And y'all can't move forward with your commitment to close the workhouse and invest. How much are we worth to you? And why can't you attend to the things that actually keep us safe? Public safety means we all have what we need. Public safety means an end to white supremacy. You must fully invest in and support a multi-year participatory budgeting process led by those who have harmed in the workhouse. Sincerely, Julia Singley. That's the extent of the written testimony.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go down through the list. Vice Chairman Boyd, do you have any comments, questions, or anything you want to add to this?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I took some notes, and before I talk about some of the notes, I just want to ask Paul Payne, can you remind us of how long you've been the budget director?
A little over 13 years.
And how long have you worked in the budget office for the city of St. Louis?
Over 32.
So would it be fair to say you've seen a lot of scenarios play out fiscally on how we fund city operations?
Yeah, yes.
Commissioner Glass, can you remind us of how long you've been a commissioner for corrections of the city of St. Louis?
A little over 8.5 years.
8.5 years. And can you remind us of how much experience you have in the corrections space?
Law enforcement approaching 40, corrections specifically around 37.
Okay, thank you. Some of my comments relate to some of the testimony that we've heard. I was taken back. First of all, I want to say I highly respect Noel. I remember when he worked in the mayor's office. He's a brilliant young man that I said when he left City Hall, he was going to do phenomenal work in somebody's community. So welcome him back to the city of St. Louis to do good work. But I was a little taken back by some of the comments. And I just want to say that it's not that simple to just say that you can transfer correctional officers to other vacancies within the city of St. Louis. I don't think that's a fair assumption to make. Number one, people would have to be willing to accept that other position. We cannot assume that they could do a lateral transfer in which all the benefits would remain intact. Though it's a nice assumption to be able to make, I'm not sure if that's reality. I think that we do have to be realistic in our assumptions and our expectations as we move forward. I think that out-state transfer of inmates, if it provides the best cost option for the city of St. Louis, may be something that we have to consider. Now, we know it was disastrous in the past. Those who've been around long enough know the whole situation with the Missouri inmates in Texas was a debacle. It was a horrible situation. But we can't just close a facility without some type of contingency plan that we may have to implement or execute. And so we need to be mindful of that. I'm curious as to how many people were let out of jail during COVID-19 that were never charged. That were never found guilty of a crime, because the comments often made about there are a lot of people that have been there 180 days, a year and a half or whatever, and they have not been found guilty. In some cases, they are found not guilty. But I'm curious as to how many were let out during COVID-19 that were rearrested for some reason of some alleged crime. I'm curious to have that report of information from the Public Safety Office, and maybe if any of them have actually had a speedy trial and have been reincarcerated and found guilty. There have been comments about that somehow the passage of this board bill was some kind of mandate from the people. That's not true. It was not a public vote taken on this. The Board of Aldermen as a whole, I think, very sensitive to wanting to close the workhouse and have the minimum amount of people incarcerated in our city as possible. Closing the workhouse is certainly a laudable undertaking. I personally would, wish that we only had one jail with only 50% incarceration. That would mean that our city is probably pretty safe. And that would be a testament to a lot of great leadership, but I'm not sure how realistic that is. But certainly that's something I could wish for and dream and even work toward. We talk, we spent a lot of time, this year talking about closing the workhouse. I wish we would have more conversations about all these programs that are underfunded, that are reentry programs that are keeping people from reentering the prison system. I haven't heard a lot of those stories. I would wish that there would be testimony that was given to substantiate, all these cost savings that we have by closing the workhouse could go toward funding these organizations because they have a proven scientific process that's making our community safer. I was one of the 27 people that voted for the board bill. And I want to correct the chairman, not to be disparaging, but this board bill was sponsored by the president of the Board of Aldermen, Lewis Reed, not by Alderman Dan Gunther. I believe he was a co-sponsor, but the President Reed was the actual sponsor of the Close the Workhouse board bill.
I stand corrected, and I apologize.
And I made it very clear during the debate of that board bill that I had a lot of trepidation about supporting the board bill. And I made a commitment that if it did not look realistic, if we did not use a process that basically I felt, good about, that we've done our due diligence, that I would introduce legislation that would extend the time. And I'm committed to that. I'm a very process-oriented person. And as far as I'm concerned, if this process needs to take more time, then I want to do that. I think we owe that to our constituency. I live in a community that is probably one of the highest crime-ridden wards in the city of St. Louis. I think, and I'm not going to speak for Alderman Boyd, but a few weeks ago when I looked at the statistics, I think Alderman Boyd's neighborhood was #1 in homicides, and mine was #2. I live in the Hamilton Heights neighborhood, and I think we are at 11 murders in this neighborhood. And that's Hamilton Heights is a small neighborhood compared to Wells Goodfellow, which is twice the size. And that saddens me. And I know that we have a problem in our city. And certainly we're not going to solve this problem by just keeping incarcerating people. You know, we need to provide the right services to people so that they can have a better quality of life for themselves and have employment that they can sustain themselves economically. But, you know, just rushing into closing the workhouse right now, I don't think is the most responsible thing to do. I'm not saying it can't be done, and I'm not saying I'm not supporting closing the workhouse. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm being responsible in my vote on if we close the workhouse. I'm sure there are a lot of other aldermen that may feel the same way. And I've talked to some of my colleagues, and sometime in the activist community, elected officials don't want to deal with drama. I don't care. I mean, I've been badgered for 17 years since I've been alderman, and I'm almost immune to the negativity and the just disrespect of elected officials. We work hard. We're passionate about our communities. I love the community that I live in, and that's why my wife and I have made huge financial investments in our community. So I don't want anybody to dare think that I'm out of touch, because I live amongst a lot of stuff that most people who are excited about closing the workhouse, they don't deal with. They don't live in my neighborhood. They don't live close to my neighborhood. And I'm not going to say that to be disrespectful to anybody that's, you know, excited and that's their agenda and that's their priority. And maybe they're getting a lot of funding to do that. I'm not going to be disrespectful and say that they're out of touch, but I'm in touch with what's going on in my neighborhood. I'm in touch with people that have committed violent crimes and were let out of jail and came back and committed more violent crime. Now, I would hope that that's not the norm, but it happens. And so as elected officials, we must make sure that we make responsible decisions in how we support our citizens when it comes to public safety. And I don't ever want to disrespect our budget director by saying that his assumptions are off and that he, if only he would do this or assume that. Because at the end of the day, the budget director is going to be the one held responsible for those assumptions. I don't want to disrespect our commissioner of corrections, who has over 30 years, by suggesting that if only he did what I think he should do, that we'll have a safer community. I'm just an alderman. I have an MBA. I can talk to you all day about business. I cannot talk to you about corrections. I can talk to you about budgets. I can debate the heck out of Paul Payne on the budget, Board Bill #1. I understand that. I don't understand corrections like the commissioner. And so I just want to make sure that as we move through this process, that we are respectful to one another in this process, whether you're the proponent or opponent of closing the workhouse, because certainly I would like to see the workhouse closed, but it's how it's closed. Because at the end of the day, we as aldermen have to put our constituents that we serve that vote for us individually, not citywide, because somebody in the 8th Ward can't vote for me, not in the 22nd. Somebody in the 15th Ward can't vote for me, not in the 22nd. Okay, and so understand and appreciate and value us for what we have to do for the people that can vote for us, that we represent. And so thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to say that. I've said my piece and I appreciate it.
Okay. Alderwoman Carol Howard, and I did get your text, and I agree with you, just so you know.
Okay. I would just like to say I concur with Alderman Boyd. This is a big issue to consider. And some of the people we don't have at the table, we keep hearing about increasing social services and the judiciary branch. They haven't been before us. I understand and respect the expertise of Commissioner Glass and Budget Director Payne. And we keep hearing about all these services that can be offered with the savings, but we haven't heard from anybody that could offer, that can actually present those services to deter crime. I think we need to step aside and look at those communities that are suffering with the murders every day that's going on. If we can solve some of those issues, should we incarcerate those people? I would be, if I was a victim of those crimes, I would be totally disappointed in my government if we chose to release those people that, you know, may be suspected or have been accused of those crimes. I understand that we are not the trial and the jury, but I think that if we are going to offer other services in lieu of incarceration, we need to make sure that we can present those services and that they are bona fide and successful for those people that are committing those crimes. This is all, you know, wonderful, and I understand. I am not a corrections officer. I am not a social worker. I worked in education, and I know that some things, you know, you have to offer people a better life. But until we have those things in place, closing down services that are available, we need to have a way to hand this off and make sure that our constituency feels safe with what we're doing. I'm a little suspicious of people saying the people spoke. Again, this was not a mandate. This was not presented to all the voters of the city of St. Louis. So as far as I have not, I've heard from some of my constituents, but when I figure I have 11,000 people that I represent, it's been a minority. But I appreciate, and I do think we do need to move forward with other ways of handling those people that are not law-abiding citizens, I guess, for lack of a better category. When I look about the city, I understand that many people are suffering from the lawlessness that's going on. So again, echoing Mr. Alderman Boyd's sentiments, I think that we need to move cautiously in this direction and closing down the workhouse. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Chairman Vaccaro. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to throw this in. We're spending more money between Cure Violence, the additional 2 million that we just did, the 7 million, plus the programs that we're working on. Our budget is twice the $8 million, or maybe not twice, but way over the $8 million that we're spending on the workhouse, trying to, you know, prevent a lot of this. So anyway, and you had sent something to me that, you know, and I would support a board bill for a public vote rather than just have one group say they are, because I know from my ward, the majority of the people do not favor this. There are some that do. I agree with you. I think maybe we do a board bill for a public vote and let the public as a whole decide. I just wanted to add that. Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard, I'm sorry, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I would like to echo some of the exact same sentiments that my colleagues have. When you just look at this issue in totality, I think we've all made some great strides in just getting us to this point. I remember initially, because this has been going on for a while, I remember initially there was commentary, and a lot of us were against closing the workhouse for some of the exact same reasons that were presented, for some of the exact same hurdles that we know exist. But when that other bill was brought forward by our president, Lewis Reed, we all unanimously felt that, okay, we do need to take a look at this. Okay. And so, you know, people could have voted no, but we all voted yes to at least get us to this point. I think it's disheartening in some ways when you have people come before us who lack the skill set and the experience about this whole issue regarding corrections. It's disheartening when they come before us as if they are the experts. And I think that as a city, we are very fortunate to have the people that we have with our commissioner as well as our public safety director. These are people who've worked in many aspects of the system and who actually know it. I mean, it's just not a passion or a agenda-driven mission for them. They really have the knowledge and expertise to delve deep into this stuff. But when you have people come before us who don't come from budget backgrounds, don't come from corrections, and act as if they know what's best and they offer a critique with nothing to back that up, I think that's kind of unfortunate. I'm in a capacity that not only have I studied corrections, I have a bachelor's and master's degree in criminology and criminal justice. I've worked in many aspects of corrections. I was a corrections officer in the Missouri prison system, and I also was a probation and parole officer and worked for Division of Youth Services. So when you look at our just correctional standards and what we have to do to house our people in the right way, and when you look at our budget and what's forthcoming with budget shortfalls, I think that this is a decision that we can't willy-nilly around with. But I think that we all are on board with exploring it, and I think that we've done that. I'm sure we'll have more conversations about it, but I just honestly don't think that we are there yet. And I think it's unfortunate when you have people on Twitter saying, you know, they bully us. I've never seen people who care so much about the people attempt to bully elected officials. Oh, you voted no on this, so you have to see us, you know. And it's like what my colleague from the 22nd Ward say, we know the people in our community. We know our voters. I've lived in my community all my life. My family has been here for 5 generations. You know, I walk out my door and see the people who are on drugs, and I see the people who steal from Family Dollar and literally knock on my door trying to sell me the stuff that they steal. So we are very in touch with our community. We know what the needs are. We know that we do have some people in our community that would be better off incarcerated if they can't get the help that they need. We know that when you look at crime, you have to take a holistic approach to crime, but we do know that all of the resources are not in place. I mean, if they were, then I think we all would be happy. No one wants to just see somebody incarcerated, but when the facts are presented to you, I don't think our commissioner would sit up and make up a story about how the bathrooms look or about the mold problem. When I looked at some of those pictures, some of those bathrooms look better than bathrooms that are in some people's homes. Now, I don't know what happened in the past, you know, even though my mother worked for 30 years at the workhouse and the Justice Center, and I literally grew up in that place, going in there touring, and it's probably how I went into the field. But I don't think this narrative that's being put out there is the most accurate one. But in spite of all of that, I believe that we all are working together to see what can be done, because we know that people are passionate about this. But I think if it places an undue hardship on our community, because I really care about those families who would have to go to a Miller County, which is probably an environment that probably has never dealt with people from the urban core. I think that that's an issue, and that needs to be considered. I would have a problem with people working in one capacity in corrections and someone assuming they could just go pick a tree or do something like that. That was kind of unfortunate that type of commentary was made. But I am hopeful that we all could get together and come up with suggestions that are just bigger than just closing a building. I hope that we can all work together and see what can be done in the best interest of everybody. It would be a great idea if we could house everybody at the Justice Center, but we know that wouldn't be feasible. And I don't feel someone that's in there, you know, awaiting trial or whatever for a petty theft crime should be housed with someone, you know, someone who's been charged with murder. I mean, there are many different levels of offenders and certain classifications that you have to provide for and have to protect people who are technically innocent. So there is so much to consider. I just hope that as a community, as a city, that we could keep moving forward. I don't like bully tactics. Bully tactics don't work well with me. That makes me shut down in a lot of ways. So I just hope that people will listen to the experts, the people who have the expertise and the knowledge. I think it is an amazing thing that you all have Noel working with you. I trust his leadership and know that he's a level-headed person, but I do know that when it comes to the budget and stuff like that, there are people at the table who kind of know what they're talking about because they've been doing it for the last 30 years. So it's my hope that we all can just come together and make the best decision and not just succumb to the pressure of a few, not a national campaign, but you know, the information that's being provided from a few people. When we are here, we're out on the ground, you know, we see what's going on. We see what my community is saying. And if you look at my ward, that has one of the highest concentrations of public housing in the entire city. And our crime is tinkering a little bit, but I mean, just in my neighborhood, we had maybe 3 or 4 murders over the last 120 days. So that's the pulse of the community. Those are the people that I listen to. And they are not inclined to believe that we should close the workhouse because they would prefer to be at the workhouse opposed to being at the Justice Center on any given day. That's what I heard from them. But I do hope that we all can work together, study the facts. I think we're moving in the right direction. We definitely are looking at alternatives, but I don't quite think that we are there yet. I would love to see this go to the voters, but it was the craziest thing ever. The people that were pushing this agenda didn't want it to go to the voters. So make that make sense to everybody. But I could go on and on about this, but I'm glad that we are constantly having public comment about this. I'm glad that we have the experts at the table. And I do know that the members that sit on this committee, they are definitely passionate about doing what's in the best interest of those incarcerated and what's in the best interest of the city. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree. This is, our committee is great. And we, you know, we just have a very good committee. And Dale, if you could, at the end of all this, because I don't want to slow things up, one of the things that Noel said is, gee, there's plenty of beds in St. Charles, and we don't have to send them far, far away. And you said you sent out to 28 places. I'll wait till the end, but if you can answer that at the end of this, I'm just curious, if there's all these beds in St. Charles, like Noel said, why did they say they just don't want our prisoners, or what was the deal? So I'll save that to the end if you could answer that for me. Alderman John Muhammad. And John might have stepped out. I know he sent something earlier. Wait, I see his picture came up. Alderman John Muhammad, do you have any comments? Or he might have stepped aside for a little bit. I'll come back to him. Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do support what our colleagues before me have said. And I'm just kind of insulted because after we have these meetings, people are calling people to call me to say that we backed out on what we decided we were going to do. And we have not backed out on it, but we are clear that we have to make sure that we do it properly. And I still look at myself as a new alder person. And so I know that the issues that we address is not as simple as black and white. And so issues that are addressed, we have to take into consideration from experts on how the process will be handled properly. And so as Dale has explained what his goal was when he first came to the workhouse and what he saw was problems. And so he started addressing them because that was his expertise. Paul Payne looked at it from the financial piece, and now we're in a pandemic, so that makes it an even greater challenge for us as a city because we don't have dollars as we thought before. And so when I hear people in my community, and like I said before, people that are sleeping on the floor because they're scared that a bullet's going to come through their house, because people are walking down the street in the middle of a block with assault rifles. That's sending a message to me that we have to do something. But what the workhouse people need to understand, we're not the people that's locking people up, and we're not the people that's holding people for 365 days. That's the judges, that's the courts, that's the circuit attorney's office, the lawyers, and so that's the legal system. And I agree with the closing the workhouse because I felt that the bail system need to be addressed. And I haven't seen that happening because everybody's on close the workhouse. But at the end of the day, Paul Payne has to look at, we'll have a big building sitting somewhere in a ward that has to have security, has to have utilities, has to have water. We still have to pay for that to be done, even if the building's empty. So I need people to understand, again, it's a process. It's not that we're saying we're not in favor of what we need to do because of the age of the building. And I applaud Dale Glass for the work he has done to try to bring it up as much as he could. But we still have to go through our process. And at the end of the day, it's a process that the Board of Aldermen and this committee of people that sit here that has to look through and analyze what's the best decision for everybody involved. So I appreciate my comment, but I'm just appalled that people continuously keep saying that we're ignoring what people are asking, and we're not ignoring it, but we just know we have a lot of work to do, and we might not make that date, but we are still working toward what we decided we would do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, and I agree with everyone. We're not opposed, we're opposed to doing something willy-nilly that hurts people. Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a couple of questions that I took notes on. First, I guess I'll ask the questions for Commissioner Glass, which I know we haven't really heard from yet. But if he could just answer these couple of questions first, and then I know you asked him to speak afterwards too.
Sure. Well,
So,
he could address mine at the same time. That's okay.
Okay, actually, we had the same one because I was going to ask you about St. Charles. But the first question I wanted to ask, just so I can make sure I get the clarity on the 40 positions, were those 40 additional positions for CJC, or were the 40 that could be transferred to CJC? And then as it relates to St. Charles and being housed, and the ones that might need to be housed, definitely we would not want it. Is St. Charles really about this process?
I think I heard both questions. I don't know if I've got a bad signal. So the first thing I would indicate, I suggested that to operate the facility with a larger number that exceeds 65, which is the optimum number of detainees that this facility should hold, that we'd have to provide for what we call emergency response teams. And you would have to have that for all shifts and all floors where the detainees were housed. When I came here, the staffing count did not have any such position, and that needed to be corrected. I developed small teams for both facilities with existing staff by taking people off of various posts. But it'll be more, the more people we have here, the more critical it will be for us to be able to respond to emergencies and that sort of thing. So that's relief factors, all shifts, and all three, actually 4 floors. In reference to St. Charles, I don't have that information in front of me. I didn't know I was going to be speaking today or participating in this committee hearing today. So I did release, as a result of a sunshine request, not only all the information I had and all the places I contacted, which is like 131 jails, and only got responses from 28. Some chose not to respond at all. What did St. Charles do specifically? I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get that same sunshine request that had all that information and forward it to the committee as well. But I think that I'm making an assumption, but maybe I shouldn't, but maybe people don't want to take on other prisoners. Maybe they want their numbers to go down as well. So that's the reality of where we're at today.
Okay, that's definitely understandable. The another question that I heard come up that I wanted to get clarity on, and this might be for Budget Director Paul Payne, but the freezing of the budget, is that an option? The freezing of the CJC budget, is that an option? Is that for Paul Payne?
Oh, sure, I can address it. Yeah, sort of a novel. I mean, it sounds convenient, but we do have positions that were in this scenario. The model that was submitted was that these positions would be moving over to CJC from MSI because there would be no layoff. So that in and of itself would increase CJC's actual spending as opposed to budget. But in addition to the additional positions that Commissioner Glass mentioned, you'd also have to accommodate both the pay increases as well as the health insurance increases that we anticipate in FY22. And then the question, as I mentioned earlier, was what do you assume without state housing? As I mentioned in my model, that was presented was that you provide some line item that would be capable of providing outstate housing. And in this instance, I assumed $50 a day or something like that. That would have to be a cost that's budgeted for. Now, if we say that we can meet capacity somehow else, well, that's a different issue. But I think given the capacity issues raised by the Department of Public Safety, it's going to have to be addressed one way or the other.
Okay. Okay. And then just, I guess, right now, where are we as it relates to the budget? I know you had mentioned about, and I'm blocking on what, because I took a note on it, but I can't find it on all these notes. But where are we as it relates to like overtime now in our budget? Are we kind of on track or not on track with the budget that we had for last year? And then as it relates to FY 2020, how are we looking projected?
For corrections?
On the overtime. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well.
For corrections for staffing and the overtime.
Okay, well, the CJC is currently overspending in their overtime. I believe they were budgeted about $500,000. They're trending about $1.5 million instead, but they've got a lot of those vacant positions that we talked about before. MSI itself is actually pretty close to projected spending for the year.
Okay, so in vacant positions, forgive me if I feel like I'm asking this question, but I just need to ask it one more time because you did just mention moving the staff to CJC. And then you mentioned that CJC is on overtime because of their understaffed, right?
That's correct. So you would expect that overtime spending would go down. Yes. If you're operating with full staff.
Okay. What will we be gauging that on as we as our outlook for FY22 and indeed, I'm sorry, 2022?
Okay.
Do you think?
Yeah, FY22. Now, I would expect that their overtime would be less, but then payroll still has to go up to accommodate the 3% increase, 3% pay increases, as well as the health insurance increase. That I want to get complicated about how we did this year's budget, but we offset some of our health insurance costs on special fund this year. So that's not in these base numbers that would have to be reflected in next year's budget.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. I think that's I see scribbled down on this paper for right now. Thank you for answering my questions, Commissioner Glass and Budget Director Paul Payne.
Alderwoman, do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. Alderman Dan Gunther, keep in mind, we're gonna have to keep it somewhat short because we're gonna bump up against a 12:30 meeting. But first off, if you have something, yeah, you were not the sponsor of this bill. You were the sponsor of the one to close the workhouse. And so I apologize for that. Yours never did go all the way through. But do you have any comments or questions you would like to ask either one, Dale Glass, Paul Payne, or anyone else? And you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, thanks again, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go with seniority and have Alderwoman Ingracia can go before me.
That's fine. Alderwoman Ingracia, you can go ahead and go. Again, keep in mind, we got like 15 minutes before we bump into the next meeting, okay?
Understood, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Alderman from the 9th. I'm curious from the perspectives of both Paul Payne and Dale Glass, since the sentiment of the board bill that we unanimously passed indicates that aldermen want to close the workhouse, and that is definitely the will of the people. What in your mind is a more reasonable timeframe in which to ensure that happens if it's not the end of the year?
I'll jump in here. I mean, most of that is a public safety's is basically what the conditions are on the ground, basically, when you're looking at it, that determine the capacity as well as the census. So I don't know if I can speak to that specifically. But yeah, I mean, from a budget standpoint, it's basically the operations of the department itself that would dictate what would be realistic, and not so much on the fiscal standpoint.
Okay, Paul, I guess while I have you, could you also let me know if there's any information you think that you should have had when you were coming up with the report that you have, or you were coming up with the report that you generated, that would have made it more clear or provided better or more comprehensive information? Anything missing, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Okay. Okay.
No, there you have.
Oh, I thought you said inform you. Yeah, the only thing I can think of is anytime we go through the regular budget process, let's say we start preparing for FY22, and we start reviewing budget requests from any department. And let's say there's a request, for instance, Dale mentioned the 40 positions and all. I mean, you would like to see, okay, what is the new posting that you would have in this new environment? And I don't know if they know that now or not, but it would be okay, because the original budget was based on a certain number of postings of guards and everything. And you know which ones work 24 hours, you know which ones work 2 shifts and all that kind of stuff. And the actual size of the staffing is based on those posting requirements. Going into FY22, you'd like to see, okay, based on what you know today and what the change in operations will be, what do those posting requirements look like now, so that you can then put together your new TO to reflect that. That's sort of a way of, going through and just finding if there's any redundancies, and maybe there's not that many positions you need here or there, that kind of thing. That's a little bit more refinement of what a TO should look like. I think that would be the first thing I'd ask in addition to what we already have.
Okay, thanks very much. Commissioner Glass, do you have any thoughts on if we can't close the workhouse by the end of the year as passed unanimously at the board, what a timeline in your mind looks like to make sure it happens?
No, Alderwoman, I don't have a timeline in mind. The reason for that is the factors that determine our population count is not something that is in our scope. I can't determine, well, I try to look at and project based on pending new laws and actions and those kinds of things, what it might be, worst case scenario. But how many people will be arrested? How many will the judge or the justice system determine should be detained? I have no way to determine that.
Okay. Well, I guess I find that pretty concerning. I mean, you indicated in testimony to us previously that you came back into this position with the city with the idea in mind that the jail should be consolidated and you were interested in closing the workhouse. So have you changed your mind on that?
Not at all.
Okay. Well, so what is the plan then to make it happen?
So I think that what I've been able to accomplish over the last 8.5 years has done what I can impact from my position about the number of people that are in jail. I mean, I'm not by no means suggesting that I take full credit for all of it because there's so many externals involved, but I'm indicating that you continue giving programs and you continue to see positive things happen. So we'll continue offering programs, trying to meet the needs of the population that exists in the jail and participate in conversations with the other criminal justice entities about our view, impact, comments about who we incarcerate and what we can do to impact that number from my perspective.
Okay, I know we have a restriction on time, so I'll stop, but thanks so much to both of you. Always appreciate the time you spend with us at the board. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the ability to ask some questions.
Okay, so Alderman Gunther, would you prefer you or Alderwoman Spencer first?
Alderwoman Spencer has seniority.
Okay, so Alderwoman Spencer, do you have anything you want to add? Keeping in mind we have roughly about 10 minutes. And some of the people that have to be in public employees, if you need to switch over, I understand. We're not taking any votes. So Alderwoman Kara Spencer, any comments? I believe she's just got her picture on there. So Alderman Dan Gunther, I'm gonna let you wrap it up and then we're gonna get ready to close the meeting.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So just a couple things that, listening to the committee speak, I do believe, there's been a lot of sentiment on the committee that this is something that we're rushing into. But I would like to remind everyone that, we're almost at a 3-year process of having these discussions. Alderman, our Chairman Vaccaro, I didn't jump up and say anything about, yes, I was not the sponsor of the current bill that passed unanimously. But 2 years ago, we started with a resolution to say what would it look like, and that was the resolution that I sponsored. And out of that, we had, I believe it was 3 public testimonies, including an evening public testimony, to where we were able to get input from people that actually have real life experience with what it was like being in the workhouse. But we also got to hear from people that are in the criminal justice reform fields, like the Arch City Defenders or the bail projects, the people that are working in this field, and explain to us what reimagining public safety looks like and how we can possibly use any savings from the workhouse to really help the lives of the people in our communities, in every community in the city of St. Louis, to make sure that crime isn't something that they have to resort to. So, it was brought up by one of our colleagues that there's been no discussion of what's going to change the lives of people. Well, we need to get to the point where we know that we have funds available to put into programs such as the Cure Violence, the Employment Connections, SLATE, after school programs, stuff like that. So just want to bring those really quick. It was also brought up, I know, at the last hearing that we had, Commissioner Glass had mentioned that, you know, he had acknowledged that there was racial disparity in the amount of time that some of our inmates are held pre-trial held with bail restrictions. So I did have one question for Commissioner Glass, is that do you actually have data that shows what the varying lengths of stay or average length of stay for inmates is based on race? Is that data that you have available?
Yes.
Is that something that you'd be willing to share with not only the committee, but the board?
Yes, that's public information. I wouldn't have a problem sharing that with anyone. I think it might be available on my dashboard, but I recall my answer to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and I indicated that the difference in length of stay based on race was not that significant. And I'm glad you asked that question because I can correct that statement somewhat. I went and looked to make sure, and it was about 100 days difference in black and white.
Yep. 100 days more for a person of color, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So Commissioner,
that is something
Commissioner Glass, please send that to us, the committee, and I'll forward it, okay?
Sure.
Thank you. And then the other question, you know, again, for Commissioner Glass, you know, we've heard a little bit about, you know, by the CJC working with 237 positions filled right now. You know, we've heard from Paul Payne that resulted in what we had budgeted as $500,000, $500,000 as overtime, but in truth, we're at $1.5 million in overtime. So obviously that's, you know, a major impact of working at 237 positions filled. But Commissioner Glass, can you really kind of expand on, you know, how has the operations changed at CJC by being understaffed by that? Besides the you know, 3 times the budgeted overtime, but what about operations? You know, how has operations changed because of only having 237 positions filled?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to respond or formulate that question. Operations. So we work overtime to fill the vacant positions. I don't want to drag it out, but just so you know, in contemplation of the possibility that the board or the city would determine to close MSI, I deliberately did not fill vacancies. And then there was a period of time when we weren't filling vacancies because I wanted to assist the city in having jobs for those at MSI. So our vacancy rate was at approximately 65 CO1s, which would cover all the COs at MSI. The city wouldn't have to worry about displacing those people or laying them off, and they would have job security. And so in terms of operations, we use overtime, and we also call each other and say, hey, do you have enough people so that I can send one from MSI to CJC or vice versa? But I'm
gonna have to cut it off because I in particular, as well as Alderwoman Hubbard, there's a whole group of us have to be on the next meeting that starts in 3 minutes. I would ask Alderman if you would call Commissioner Glass Alderman Gunther, any information you would want, if you want him to send it to us in writing, just let him know. The problem is we're up against, we did all the public speaking, but we're up against, we got 3 minutes to the next meeting.
Alderman Vicario, just one quick statement.
Very fast.
Very fast. The question that the Alderman asked about racial disparity and length of stay, it is on our public dashboard.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're gonna, I don't want to be rude, and it's just that we're seriously got 1 minute. We're up against the other meeting.
I see 12:27, and I was trying to adjust to your 12:30 timeline. So,
Well,
but
the
I'll let
meeting
you.
starts at 12:30. We have to sign on to the other one.
Yep.
But at this point, and we can have another meeting. We can have another one next week, the week after, at the pleasure of everybody. At this point, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting for now. Do we have that motion?
So move.
Okay, and I'll second it. I know a lot of members have sort of gotten off already, so all in favor of adjourning the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
I think we're only ones left. We're going to adjourn this, and if you want, we can bring this back. Alderwoman Spencer, I did call for you several times earlier. You might have been out of the room, but thank you.
Mr. Chair, I was having some technical difficulties and wasn't
Okay.
unable to unmute, so.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and that happens to
And
a
I do
lot.
have some comments I'd like to make and a couple of questions, so I appreciate that you're going to
We'll
host another
Yeah,
hearing.
We'll host another hearing, yes, no problem. I have to sign on to the next meeting, so we're gonna adjourn this meeting. I got 1 minute to sign into the next meeting, and if you would like, we won't open it to public testimony, but we can let all the aldermen speak that want to speak at the next, and we can do that as soon as next week if you want.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I ask a question? So we're considering having a public vote on closing down the workhouse, but we're not taking public testimony on the issue?
We already did public testimony twice, but listen, we had a motion to adjourn. We had a motion to adjourn. And certainly I offered a meeting next week, but we have to adjourn this meeting. I have to sign on to another meeting. Whether you had technical difficulties or whatever, you chose not to be in time. We've been doing this since 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock this morning. And now you're wanting to start something at the end of a meeting. The meeting's adjourned. Certainly send me whatever you want. We'd be happy.
Mr. Chair, I just appreciated your clarification. That was the only question I had, and I appreciate your
Okay.
answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The meeting's adjourned.